Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about Henry Danger the movie, which was just released last Friday and is streaming on Paramount Plus and Nickelodeon. And I'm joined by an all-star panel of guests. First, returning to the show is costume designer Farnaz Khaki-Sadigh. Glad to have you back, Farnaz, and a special thanks for bringing this panel together.
Hi, I'm happy to be back again and great to see everyone again here.
Yeah, let me introduce the people we're talking about. Next, Director of Photography Chris Kempinski. Nice to have you here, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Continuing around the table, production designer Bridget McGuire. Bridget, welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you guys.
In our fourth chair, makeup designer Jenn Kaminski. Jenn, it's great you could join us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And finally, director Joe Menendez. Joe, welcome to Below the Line.
Hello, thank you. Happy to be with all my fabulous collaborators.
This is going to be a lot of fun. Warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers for Henry Danger the movie and possibly the television shows that preceded it. For the uninitiated, Henry Danger the series originally aired on Nickelodeon for 5 seasons from 2015 to 2020. It also gave birth to a spin-off, Danger Force, which ran for 3 seasons from 2020 to 2024. To start us out, and Joe, maybe you're the one best positioned to do this, how did this movie come together? And talk to me about how you brought in this crew.
Well, it was a movie that had been in the works for a number of years prior to me coming on board. And so they sent me the script. I had sort of known about it, but they sent me the script. And frankly, initially, I had passed. Even prior to getting the script, I didn't want to do it because I had done what I called my share of booger and fart joke kid shows. And I was like, I don't want to do another kid show, but thank you. And then my agent said, no, you should read it. It's a legit sort of comedy family superhero movie. And I did, and he was right. And I thought the script was really fun and signed on right away. You know, I had to pitch a take on how I saw it, which was a more sort of grounded version of the movie, you know, because this is based on the sitcom Henry Danger, and the sitcom being a multicam show and being a show that is sort of high key lighting. It's a 4-camera, like a proscenium show. It's very different than what I was envisioning. So I was very clear when I pitched, this is what I would do to turn it from a sitcom into a movie, and they bought into that, thankfully. Soon after that, the process began of bringing in my collaborators, and with the exception of Farnaz, these were all people that I had worked with before. And that was really important to me, to bring in collaborators who not only did I know they were talented and fantastic artists, but also good human beings. So I make sure, you know, with Bridget and Chris and Jenn, you know, Farnaz was somebody that I met on this, and I instantly hit it off with her. And now I hope to do the same thing with her on future shows and keep bringing her back. So, you know, they say a director is a jack of all trades and a master of none, because all that I do, and I joke, but I say that I mumble and I point and grunt. And these folks here are the ones that actually make things happen. And I don't say that facetiously or with false modesty. Like, all I could do is just kind of describe or show them my little drawings, and they're the ones that make things happen. So for me, it's about them, and my hat's off to them and the really stellar work that they did on this movie.
So who came in first? Like, or were you reaching out to each of these folks? Who came in and got to warm up the offices for everybody else?
I can't remember if it was between Chris and Bridget. Like, I know the two of them were the ones that I went to almost immediately. So I don't know which one of you two, I don't know if you guys remember who
I think we started scouting back in December. So we were scouting, I think, like pretty early in December.
And Bridget, is this December a year ago, 2023, or further back than that?
December a year ago. But that was a good month before we started in on prep, which was great because we got a lot of things nailed down. I mean, when prep started in January, we basically had the bones all sort of laid out, which was great because that meant that everybody could just hit the road running. And Chris, you started with us in January, right?
I came in for one quick meeting in December. I'd read the script. Joe reached out early and said, "Hey, like, we've already made this show, but in a different format, kind of thing. And I really love to have you out on this." And I mean, I obviously my first answer is yes to Joe every time, but this was definitely this was biting off more than we could chew, and I was excited to get going. So that yeah, it was pretty cool. So we got a early December, like our late December meeting. I think Dan VFX was there, and a few other people, locations like you said, and yeah, we got the ball rolling. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it was a tie between Chris and Bridget as to who I called first. So, but like when I heard that, Jenn was available and interested, I was like, we have to get her, we have to get her, we have to get her. I had just worked with her on Snowpiercer, so I was very excited that she was happy to come on, and then Farnaz, like I said, I met her right after.
I want to follow up on what you mentioned, Joe, about a different take on the television show. Clearly, we're inspired by the series, but yes, these are 20 to 25-minute sitcom style episodes. Where are we trying to go with the show? How does it relate? But then how is it also going to be different?
Well, you can't make a movie based on a sitcom and not have it be funny. And but the conversation almost immediately, even prior to the team coming on, my work with the writers and with the studio was the tone, because a sitcom, especially a kids sitcom, is very different than what a movie would be. Like a kids sitcom sort of get their origins in kids sketch comedy. There was a Canadian show actually called You Can't Do That on Television that sort of was the launch of Nickelodeon comedy, if you will. But where the sketch comedy thing on kids TV really took off was in the mid '90s with All That and the Amanda Show and the Keenan and Kel Show. And what happened is kids sketch comedy, these little sort of 3-minute, 2-minute little sketches that they could be, like it's a kid playing an old man and he's like running a company, he's a CEO or whatever, or he's the president. Are really funny 2-minute sketches, but that sort of brand of broad humor went into kids sitcoms. And if you watch a lot of kids sitcoms, they have this really sort of sketch comedy-esque kind of tone to them. And that works, like you said, in the 22-minute format. And it works really well in the 22-minute format. It doesn't translate into a movie. I mean, it's like, in my view, it didn't translate into a movie. It would start feeling really manic and insane after a while. So my first impulse, and luckily everybody was on board, was that we ground it, set it in a reality, but we still have to do Henry Danger. So the beauty of a multiverse movie is that it allowed us opportunities to have sort of broad humor, but we went more Monty Python. We went more that kind of, I'm a big, Zucker Brothers kind of fan, like Airplane and all that. So I love, that kind of humor. So it wasn't so much about doing kids sitcom. It was more about doing a family superhero movie with legit action. But then when we did the comedy had to feel like Henry Danger a little bit. So that's sort of the big difference. Obviously visually, we could talk about it later, what Chris did to obviously make the movie not feel like a multicam sitcom. But the biggest difference is the tone. How do you turn a sitcom into a movie? And it's by not doing sitcom humor. And again, I'm not putting down sitcoms. I started in sitcoms, by the way. I got my Writers Guild and Directors Guild card doing multicam sitcoms, so I'm very fond of them. But when you're doing a movie, you can't do a multicam sitcom.
And we're going to talk more about how that applies with specific scenes and areas. But I'm also curious from the makeup and costuming perspective, Jenn, Farnaz, what do you take from the original show and how do you translate that into that aligns with what Joe's talking about, a different vision for the show?
Costume wise, it was one of the conversations early on that me and Joe had was we wanted to pay homage to the sitcom, but at the same time, we wanted to make it tonally look more mature and relatable to the audience who are now and the fans who are now grown up, right? So a lot of references that we wanted to do tonally with costumes was like Guardians of the Galaxy or Avengers, like that sort of like style of superhero-esque movie. So it was a little bit more geared towards a mature audience and taking that original series and elevating it to for an older generation.
But you still got to do the OG costume, which was fun, like being able
Yes.
to have the open, because we opened the movie with that sequence where we see young Kid Danger. So that was fun. Like, can you talk about, like, because I think you had to like find the suit in LA, or like because you got to find that original suit, right?
Yeah, we had to try and locate the original suit and the original pieces and actually like the materials for it. So that was a bit of a challenge because nobody knew really where it was.
Well, you got like some kind of Raiders of the Lost Ark. They've lost all the costumes
Yeah.
from this. It's gone
No,
into this
it was
warehouse
like-
somewhere.
It was like somewhere in the lockup, one of the lockups at Nickelodeon, and nobody, like none of the boxes were labeled, so nobody knew which box it was. So we had a PA basically go in there and like open every box and take pictures and send me. And it's like, is this it? Is this it? Is this it? And I'm like, yeah, okay, so this piece. And we had everything sent up. And I talked to the original costume designer for the series and managed to locate some of the original fabric from the builders in LA that was sent up as well. We couldn't use the original one from the sitcom because it didn't fit our actress. You know, Jace was like 6 feet tall and she's 5 feet tall. So it just didn't work. So we had to basically like rebuild the original suit from scratch once we had it in Vancouver.
Regards to the makeup for that, for Missy's, was that over the head mask where we actually had to face mask. It was a pullover mask and build because I don't think we ever found the actual original Henry Danger mask. It was lost somewhere far in production. We don't even know where it went. So we were basically running off of pictures that Joe had given me that he wanted the Jace in the previous episodes of a point of Henry Danger that we wanted that mask to look like, the hairstyle, the color. It was a lot of back and forth with Joe, a lot of back and forth with the Amazing Apes, which was the shop that we were dealing with fabrication. I think we had casted Jace, and then we kind of sculpted his head, and then they hair punched all of the hair into the overhead mask. They built the mask into like the Kid Danger mask into the actual face. And then she just kind of pulled it over her head. And it was kind of funny because she would put it on and you're just like, it just looks like a completely different person. And she's like, when I look at myself, I don't even look like me. Like, I don't feel like me. But that was really cool. And that was a lot of fun to fabricate. That's one of the parts of my job that they're really cool to do. As for all the other kind of looks, it was just dependent on the worlds that we were in. So like Farnaz said, a more maturity to the overall show. So we were basing all the makeup designs based off of all the different worlds that we were in and what Joe's kind of overall concept of every world was going to be, and just went with him and kind of shot some ideas back and forth. And that's kind of how we came up with every world's look with regards to the makeup designs.
What I loved about the rubber mask that Jenn made, which was it was a little freaky, by the way, the rubber mask, because it was like when you got really close to it, and it's like rubber mask, but you know, I shot a lot of it in wide shots so that you sort of can't tell that it's a rubber mask until you kind of see it up close. But I remember that when Glee Dango, who plays Missy, put on the mask as she first walked out, she's so small and thin that she almost looked like a matchstick, like the head was almost too big.
Yeah.
It was a little bobbleheady, and it was a really weird thing, but it balanced out in the stuntman, you know.
Yeah.
So that was all. But anyway, the rubber mask was, I don't know where that rubber mask is, but you could drive down the street with that rubber mask on, and people that drive by would think you're a real person wearing a mask, because it was a really good mask. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Look at that thing.
You know, one of the things I was most impressed with the show is, and we've alluded to it a couple of times, these multiple worlds that it's going into, which gives each of you an opportunity to basically do a separate movie and have different approach to it. But in general terms, we talked about prep starting a year ago, December. How much prep did you have? How many weeks of shooting, and where did all this take place?
I think I had 9 weeks of prep. But we started, like I said, I put a week of prep in December so we could nail down the locations. And then we started early January. And then I think we were shooting March 1st.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that.
So I think for me, 9 weeks of prep, for most people, like 8, some people 6. It was a lot to get done in a relatively short period of time. We have the rad to build, and that plays, I think, all of the realities with the exception of the dystopia. So that had to be ready to go almost like first up. Actually, it was actually ended up playing day one. So it was a super complicated build. It was used in a number of different ways, sometimes like as a football and sometimes as a plot forwarding device, punching us into different realities.
Yeah, and the rad is the reality altering device that our Missy character, dressed as a Kid Danger, is stealing from in the opening scenes.
Exactly right. And then
how many of those did we have, Bridget? We had, I forget how
many.
Only
just enough.
Right.
Like truly
the right answer. Yeah.
Every time there was only one that was completely tricked out. There was some robotics in it. There was video playback in it. We had one of those, and I don't know if it's the case on every film, but sometimes actors aren't super careful with intricate props.
What?
So I was really happy the last day that the rad got filmed and it was still in one piece.
Yeah, and Jordan, our on-set prop guy, was almost treating it like you would like a firearm. And like the moment we would say cut, he would come and grab it and take it. He would take it away from the actors. I think we had like 6 of them, and like Bridget said, they all did something different, you know. Yep. And it was like the full-on rubber one, which is the one that we gave them mostly, you know, like when they were carrying it under their arm. And it, by the way, it did fall down. Like they did drop it a few times, and not the super like tricked out one. That one never fell, but the other ones did.
It did get scratched though. Wasn't there a scratch on it?
Yeah, and actually, when you see the movie, we digitally erased the scratches.
That's awesome.
There's no scratches on the rad anymore, Bridget.
Oh, thank God. No. Anyways, there was a lot to do in a very short time. A relatively short prep. I mean, every single department was super challenged because, like you were saying, we were essentially doing 5 different movies with 5 different looks, 5 different, the lighting, everything was different for all of the different looks.
Yeah,
I think we were very fortunate that a lot of our locations came to us pretty quickly and we locked them in, and that didn't really change. Like the only thing that changed was the nightclub.
Yeah.
And that was for creative reasons. It wasn't really, but I maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I think most of our locations came pretty smoothly. And for most shows that I've been on, there wasn't, you know, there wasn't juggling. There was the timing worked out, like everything, like the way our board was and schedule wise, it all just kind of seemed to work out. So it gave us more time to be able to actually do what we wanted to do, which again was a treat.
Yeah,
it's just my own laziness, dude. So that it was like I didn't want to get in the van again. I was like, all right, we're good. No, I'm just joking. No, but to Chris's point, creatively, we were looking at some real nightclubs initially for Shimmers, and then I sort of had this moment. And I think I called you first, Bridget.
Yeah.
And I said, I hadn't even called Chris. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell the producer. I just said, Shimmers should be from the point of view of a 12-year-old. And a 12-year-old has never been to an actual nightclub. She would have no idea what an actual nightclub would look like. So it would be a nightclub because these are worlds that she's written in her fan fictions, in her stories. So the challenge then I posed to Bridget, which she delivered phenomenally on, was like, what would a nightclub from a 12-year-old's perspective be? And she came up with a lot of really cool and neat stuff.
That was a super fun set to do. The like even the name Shimmers sort of alluded to that shimmer wall that we ended up putting up behind the dance floor, and then just the idea that this is coming out of the 12-year-old's imagination. Like, what would a 12-year-old have in a nightclub. And it just let us do all sorts of super fun stuff.
Yeah.
I think everybody really enjoyed that set. Everybody was so sad when it came down, and it came down pretty, like, we shot it and then it had to go because we needed that space for something else.
Green screen, yeah.
The green screen.
Yeah, exactly.
It was very sad. It was very, it was such a fun, beautiful set. And we all sat there. We just said, I can't believe like this beautiful set is just going to, like, by tomorrow, there's going to be dudes on ladders taking hammers to the thing, you know? And
yeah.
There it was.
Yeah. That's where it goes.
Yeah, all the lights had to go to the courtyard. Like we had, like
that's right.
It was a whole, it was a whole thing. Like, yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, I like movies on a budget. Yeah, we have to be creative.
No waste. Every, I think we used every square inch we had in the studio. We even ended up using like the corridors between the stages for for some of our sets. And yeah, everything was very efficient.
But the set design also was, and the set decorating, it was also great. There's so many details. Like they're there if you look, but like behind the bar, there's no alcohol. So it's like they do like like smoothies and there's a gumballs and candy and like fries. Like there's a little bucket of fries. Like it's a 12-year-old will be like, well, that's what would be there. And so I think your team had a really great time putting all that together, and like what the furniture looked like as well. That Rachel Robinson, who was a set decorator, what she found. Yeah. Like, it was just really, really a fun set. There was a stage there, obviously, for Frankie Grande to do his song. And we went through a few different machinations, didn't we? Like where the stage would be, and
yeah, a few, but it all, again, that set had to be up and going pretty early in the schedule. So yeah, I think we had that designed within a few days, the general layout. But it was really nice that, we were all working in the same building together. So the development of the sets was organic.
Well, I would for Shimmers, I'd come and talk to you, Bridget, every day. I'd look at what Rachel was kind of putting together, and I talked to Shay about posters and whatever, and then we'd put some lights behind whatever paint, because the paint department was painting just canvas, and so we'd put lights behind it to see that it was the right tone and the colors, to make sure the colors weren't matching and blending, and so that was fun. And then I'd hop over to Farnaz's office, and we'd have a whole big chat about wardrobe, and it was good to be able to like just veer from one office to the next, and then just discuss about, okay, hey, what are we doing for this? What are we doing for that? And then again, with the camera tests, we were actually able to see what we were about to do before, so we could actually get makeup and wardrobe and all the props and the light up furniture and stuff on camera before. That was a busy day.
That was busy. Yeah, and that was well worth doing.
Very helpful.
You bring up a good point there, Chris, that you guys were all able to share space, because I know during the COVID years, a lot of pre-production got pushed into a virtual space where people were doing it at home or not able to get together. Has it been like this for a while, or is this 2024 really when production started to be able to collaborate in person again?
For me, it was the first time in years that I'd actually been able to be in a room with a bunch of people and have people coming in and out, and just the whole flow of people. During COVID, that was really discouraged, and it just changes the whole tone of the production if you can't just go running into somebody's office and say, hey, I have an idea. What do you think of this? And that certainly hadn't been happening for since 2020.
I loved it. I love being able to walk into everybody's space. Bridget and Farnaz could not have been farther away from each other in that building. You guys it was like a mile
opposite end.
I know, it was really nuts, but it was great to be able to walk in and just like see things and hold things. Like you forget how quickly that's such a critical part of making a show, and I mean all that was gone during COVID. So this was great to be able to do But I actually had a question for Farnaz and for Jenn, because like going back to Shimmers real quick, because I never asked this. How much of that stuff, like the clothing that they were wearing, was stuff that extras brought? How much of it was stuff that you gave them, that you provided? And Jenn, like some of the people had the funkiest makeup in shimmers, and how much of that did they do, and how much of that was your team? Like I never, like every day I would always like, I gotta ask, and then of course the day gets away, and I never asked.
I would say for us, it was about 85% of what we saw on camera was provided by us. Because, as much as like, bless their hearts, like they try really hard to bring stuff, but, you give them directions, you send them pictures, and background never shows up with the right kind of look. And it's really funny because we had a lot of young people come in, and people in like their like late teens, early 20s, and a lot of them came, like, I mean, shimmers is such a specific look. It's like it's got a very like 70s disco vibe to it, and everything is like glittery and bright. And they all showed up with like baggy sweatpants and like little short crop tops and runners, and half of them couldn't even walk in heels. Like, we're like, no, you have to put on heels. And they're like, but I don't know how to walk in heels. It was really fun, kind of interesting to see that the younger generation's idea of what to wear to a club is very different than my generation of what we
even
would wear.
Mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane. That, like,
Yeah.
But I guess that makes sense because my 19-year-old daughter doesn't like wearing heels. Like she avoids it. That's crazy. I hadn't thought of that.
Socks and Crocs.
Yeah.
And Jenn, was that the same thing? Like I saw like guys and girls, they had this elaborate stuff, and I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, like Farnaz said, we sent pictures to background casting that get sent out to anybody who's casted for those. And, this is what we're looking for. This is the degree. And Vancouver is a very blood, dirt, sweat kind of film and TV type of world out here. So it's not very often you get to do glitter, and glitter in the makeup world is like herpes. We call it the makeup of herpes because you get it somewhere and it's everywhere all the time. So we try to contain it to one area because the worst thing for a DP is glitter in a non-glitter situation. So at least in this world with Chris, it was easy enough to just allow freedom. I remember saying to Chris, like, hey, how much glitter are we allowed to do? Like, what is there any faux pas on your end that we should avoid? And he was like, no, just go do what you need to do. So we really did like kind of like what Farnaz was saying, that 70s type of vibe with a lot of color. And we pulled a lot from Bridget's set design and Chris's coloring. And the background came, I would say, like ingredients with Farnaz, I would say about 85-90% was my team, because they would come. Some people just knew because they've done drag, they've done their thing. So when they saw the pictures, they were like, oh, I know what I need to do. Let's do it. And some people came just so done up, and I was like, yes. And then some people just came with nothing. And I'm like, hey guys, like we don't have the time to sit here and do a full face of makeup. So I really need you guys to, start somewhere, so that we just need to add. But a lot of people don't. There's a makeup look now these days with influencers that are very like cutthroat, like very contoured, very everything. And there's really no glitter. So a lot of people don't understand what glitter and color together looks like. So a lot of it was my team just nailing down those looks. And even with us, I had to be like, it's okay, guys, don't hold back. Like, let's just do this. Because I think as makeup artists, we tend to get a little scared, like, oh, how much can we do? Because you have to factor in what the DP or the director wants and like how much you can do. And I'm just like, hey guys, they just want us to go all out. So just go all out on everybody as an individual, who they are. Doesn't matter, whatever they're willing to do. You get the odd person that's like, I don't want that, but you kind of figure out different ways to work around it. Try to, you got to keep in mind that the cast has their own specific look for that world. So not matching any people around the cast regards to background in that kind of same realm. So individualizing all the looks in the kind of, if this one group is kind of together, okay, they can kind of have like their look, and then also coordinating with Farnaz. Her and her team were so great with sending us pictures with regards to who was wearing what. So we can kind of figure out, okay, well, this person should have this kind of makeup to go with this outfit. So that was also extremely helpful. So yeah.
We got very lucky in the sense of like at least getting to pre-fit some of the background for shimmers. So we actually knew what they were wearing before the camera day. So we could send that to hair and makeup. So they could also like color coordinate with the outfits because, they had a picture of like what the head to toe look was costume wise. So it was really helpful to have that in prep.
I started finding my favorites in the background, and I would have Joanne move certain people to be more featured than others. There are some people that like, I that came in and like understood the look, because like it was the one set that you could do that you could come in full on and go, be over the top. That wouldn't apply in the other realities in the movie, but in that reality, and there were a few people that got it. I was always like, oh, let's get him here. Let's get them together. And then some people I would kind of like, all right, let's send her back that way, But for the most part, like I knew who to. It's always weird, like when you go up to an extra and you gotta like, oh, we got to move that person back because I don't want to have that conversation in front of the extra. So I try to, pull Joanne aside and like,
We actually got like, I don't know if you remember, but like I think we came out of the dystopia backlot set, and we had to work a Sunday to do dance rehearsal and have all the shimmers went like up and running the day before we shot, because I had follow spot people who hadn't seen the dance number. I had a whole bunch of lighting, like the whole movie's lighting cues. I mean, I don't know, like I really have to tip my hat off to the lighting department for what I put them through. and to the board operator was key. Like, I mean, all those effects have accent lighting to it, but we can get to that later. But
well, Chris, we'll talk about like those panels were all like translucent panels.
Shimmers was made up of fabric panels that we rear lit with LEDs, and we tried to come up with a color palette that both complemented what the room, but also made our key actors stand out. So I had such a fun time. But again, all the zerps and the pulling in and out of realities, all that stuff, there was lighting cues that went along with all that. So on our test days and all that kind of stuff, I had follow spots following Frankie and the dancers, but they didn't play, and all the lighting in Shimmers was hard lighting. Like I went with old, Dean Cundy, like hard lights, like hitting people in the right spot, and I thought it looked really nice. Like I was really happy with what we pulled off for what we did. Again, like because we originally went in and thinking that it was going to be a nightclub, so to see it transform into what it was a ton of fun. But it was all, I had spotlights doing circles. We had when Captain Stash flies, like that's just the roof of the stage that I just embraced and made like kind of rainbow colors up in the rafters of the studio. So we really utilized like every square inch of the space, and we didn't try and masquerade it for something it wasn't. And I know that some people were concerned that it was going to look like a studio. I don't know. I thought it looked great. I was really excited about what we pulled off.
Hey, Chris, you referenced the Captain Stash character. And so, Jenn, I wanted to come back to you about that mustache.
It was real, wasn't it?
No, yeah. Because in the film world, we never shoot anything in sequence, obviously. We shoot everything out of order. Yes, we had to get one fitted and specifically made for him. And those guys were so good. We had to glue so much stuff to their face. And Sean was he was such a good sport. And I was like, today's a mustache day. He's like, And because it's just so hard to eat and talk when you're not used to having that, especially when it's not a permanent thing, a part of your face. So, and we're in there touching him up all the time because the sweat and just the hot air from the nose tends to break down the glues. But yes, that was a specific mustache specifically made for Sean to match his hair color, his actual beard. He came in with some facial hair to start, and then we clean shaved him because he had to be. I think Dystopia, we had a little bit of scruff, and we were able to get away with that because we kind of shot all that stuff first-ish with them. But otherwise, he was pretty clean shaven. So I would say at lunch, do you want to take it off? And he's like, no, I don't want to take it off. I don't want to have to take it off and then glue it back on. Let's just leave it on. And but he was a good sport about it. But yes, it does. We try to do our best to help him with the movement of it all, so that when he talks, he doesn't have restrictions. But he was sure happy when we were done filming Shimmers, man, because he did not.
He definitely was a good sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
What Jenn said, we shot in the first week, we did the stuff out in the forest, in the post-apocalyptic stuff, where Sean, those were shot in the first week of shooting, and Sean had a full beard. So Sean kept telling me, like, dude, seriously, let's shoot Shimmers right now so I could just shave off the beard and leave the mustache. That way I don't have to have a fake mustache, because he was dreading what Jenn was saying, and I told him, oh, dude, we're not shooting that next. I'm sorry, we have to clean shave you. And he was very unhappy but he's a pro, like Jenn said, and Farnaz, and whatever the show needed, he did. But he was really pushing to see if I could change the schedules to work around his beard. And I'm like, I wish we could work around your beard, dude. I really do, but we couldn't. So he was a good sport about it, though. But yeah, we had to shave him. And every time that he put the mustache on and he would show up on set, swear to God, every morning he would show up with the mustache, he would just give me a head shake, like, dude, really? Man, why, dude? Why? And he's looking at that. Yeah. And like, there were a few times that he side-eyed me when like somebody from Jenn's team would come in and start to retouch. He'd just be side-eyeing me like, you seeing this? You watching this? You watching this?
And the poor guy, I mean, he had the mustache, and then he had the tight pants, and then he had to put a harness on, and he was put through the ringer.
And don't forget the 4-inch platform shoes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
do all his action
and the mullet.
Yeah. It was all worth it.
Yeah.
And the best dad joke on the whole show. That was really good.
Yeah.
When we're talking about patience on looks, I'm also curious how Jace took to his Lord Lolly outfit, because that got a laugh from me.
Yeah, he was not thrilled about it, I have to say. But he obviously understands, again, like what we said earlier, he understands the humor. Like we're making a movie based on a sitcom. So that's a perfect example of something that you do that you have to have in the movie. You can't get completely away from the fact that this was a sitcom. So part of what the sitcom was, almost every episode they showed up in some zany outfit. Like they would be in disguise. Again, it's taking the sort of sketch comedy tone onto a sitcom, and some of that had to bleed over into the movie. So hence the Lord Lolly thing. I think the first time he put it on, very similar to what Sean would do with the mustache, he would just give me a look, because I signed off on the look. So I signed off on the wig, I signed off on the costume, and honestly, I'm not going to lie. I think there was like that first day, I was like, I don't know if he's going to show up. I don't know if he's going to wear this costume, but he did. To his credit, he wore it and fully embraced it, and did the scenes. And like you said, Skid, they were very funny, and they definitely got a laugh. Yeah, when he says, by the way, do you hate me? When he's saying that to me and to Chris Nowak, the writer, and to Jake Farrell, the writer. That's him going, do you hate me? Is that what it is? That's to us. But that was a fun costume. That was a great costume.
I think, like the biggest challenges with Jace's costume was all the action that had to happen. And like, aside from creating that look and making it look the way it did, we had to be so conscious of the fact that he had to get wired and had to have a stunt version and get padded underneath there, make sure that like, you know, it worked with all of that. Like there's a point where he gets grabbed by the collar and thrown, and you know that material is not you know safe to do that. So we had to figure out ways of like working with the stunt coordinator of what can we do to help them to make sure that A, they're not ripping the costume in half the first time like they throw him, and B, it's comfortable enough for the actions to take place. So that was our biggest challenge with that.
Well, as much fun as you guys had in the Shimmers nightclub, I want to jump to another world. I want to compare it to Dystopia, which is set up in the Dangerverse universe. It's an established place. It was mentioned, I think, a couple of times at the end of the television show. And I think it's a good example of what you were talking about, Joe, about trying to take a more mature tone. I want to know about what each of your challenges were in bringing that to life. And Bridget, maybe we hop back to you about the set design and what you were trying to do with that.
Yeah, we were trying to stay grounded in reality. We see there's one little scene that they shoot at the very end of Henry Danger where they're at a noodle bar.
Noodle bar.
We wanted this sort of kind of Blade Runner, neon, reflective Hong Kong alley kind of feel and vibe to it. We were fortunate that there's a backlot in Langley that we were able to use that was available and it's pretty good looking. We had used it before on Kung Fu for a couple of different scenarios. And so we just went in there and put in a whole bunch of illuminated sign boxes and neons and anything that would give us some nice reflection. And then we made sure we had a good wet down, steam to give that sort of film noir kind of vibe to it, just so that we're really somewhere else. We are no longer in Swellville, but as far away as we could possibly get. And we shot that was way up at the beginning of it. It seems like everything was at the beginning of the schedule now, but I think that was you know, a big nut to pull off in a short time. Again, it was a lot of fun though. It looked great, I thought.
What I'll add to Bridget is that you know, the challenge that that I gave her in what Dystopia was, Hong Kong, Dubai, it had to feel like a sort of cosmopolitan kind of city. But because we were shooting it in Martini Town out in Langley, we had more the brownstone kind of look, is like at street level. So the challenge for Bridget and for Chris then was, how do you bring some of that high-end kind of look to this sort of brownstony kind of backlot that we have? And one of the ways, obviously, we knew that we were going to show the skyline was all going to be CGI in the background. So we sort of mapped it out where we knew the skyline was this way, the port was this way. So we kind of like did like a little map. And I think, Bridget, I think you even came with a little map that you kind of like we knew where everything was. And I think that really helped in terms of the lighting of it and the design of it.
And what I loved is that every reality that we came at, I use a different set of lenses and filter combo. So shimmers, I use these lenses called Artistes, which are spherical lenses that kind of mimic. They have anamorphic characteristics. But then and for shimmers, I put orange streaks, like an orange streak, like so. Even like Franchini's costume would like every once in a while you'd get these little orange pings kind of coming off of it because like again I was like hit everything with light. But back to Dystopia, that was so it was just again. We start with Jason in the tower before he kind of comes in, and then we use a totally different set of lenses for that because we wanted the flares and the press conference kind of look, but still holding the Dystopia the feel. And then when we get into the city, like you probably saw that pretty dramatic entrance into the town. You know, I went with a cleaner look, but really shallowed up the field. So we really tried to focus all of our attention on the actors and let the background just not go away because it was always there. And but there was never really a reason to focus on what was happening behind what we wanted them to see. So we always kept your attention on our action, which was it's just I had a blast. It's actually a lot smaller than it looks. It's really just like a one road driveway. We barely get two cars beside each other driving in two directions. So
I think we shot every single inch of it. Like we used the alley, we used the main street. We brought in backings to sort of fill in the end of the streets, because in the daylight you would have seen like off into the farmer's field next door. So we had to create a backing so that we weren't shooting as much out of it as we possibly could.
One of the things that we got, Skid, from the studio, because again, when they were all on board with this being sort of a more grounded version of the sitcom, but the sitcom was, again, high key lighting, very like where like no matter what angle you could see everything, there's no shadow. In this one, we were going to be a bit more grounded, especially when the power goes out, when blackout takes the power out in the city. Now we were even darker. So we couldn't do something like what a lot of movies and TV shows look like these days, which is like you almost feel like your TV set needs to be adjusted. You know, there's some shows that you can't see anything. It's just like it's almost like it's intentionally underexposed. We knew we weren't going to do that for a number of reasons. One of them being that the studio said, we don't want to do that. But creatively, we didn't want to do that either. So Chris mentioned Dean Cundy earlier, and he was a major inspiration, the director of photography, Dean Cundy. He was a major inspiration for this movie because Chris and I watched a lot of Dean Cundy's work from the late 80s and early 90s. And Chris made some revelations that I hadn't even noticed that I thought were really cool. And it's sort of the approach that he took, especially in dystopia, especially when the power was out. Like what you did, Chris, when like with our actors are always, but like you always played with the letting the backgrounds fall off or whatever. Like I'll let you much more eloquently than me, but I thought that was like I'm such a huge Dean Cundy fan, and I had never noticed that he did that until you pointed it out.
Well, it's funny because Joe and I are the same age, so we both grew up watching Spielberg and Zemeckis, and basically every like Dean Cundy started, Carpenter, Spielberg, like he did everything that was like Zemeckis and all that stuff, but he did everything that was like VFX. Like it's easy for us to do now because Dean Cundy did it first, if that makes any sense. But back to Joe's point, we looked at those movies, and all those movies were, you could always see what the actors were doing. It's just because the scripted is dark doesn't mean you should not be able to see what's happening script wise. And because we had an action movie, I have a character who's in pitch black, head to toe, flowing costume, which is amazing, and I want to see every aspect of it. So I went with a two-tone look, basically. Even when the lights are on, I was always lighting the shadows. So I did it a different color, and we'd always do this two-tone kind of feel to it. But like Joe said, I'd let the background go dark. Not dark, but like mysterious, so that you're focusing on we're guiding you through the movie, and we want you to see all the things that we want you to see. And when we want you to see it, not your eyes wandering to a background character that's walking across the street while something important is happening, but also in the vein of all of those early movies, because we really looked at Guardians, Back to the Future. What else? Like, because all of these kids that have grown up with the original like the original show, also have grown up watching, John Landis movies, and then graduated to Lord of the Rings and Marvel. And so they've watched these comedies that are not just super high lit, high key shows and they still come off. I think the comedy plays off a lot better when you treat the audience like a grown up, because they all get it. They know what's happening. So we really tried to play that up to pay homage to those, filmmakers that came before us, to really to just treat the audience with respect and come up with something pretty cool to watch, like pretty fun.
Yeah, and I'll add, Skid, that Farnaz's costume for Blackout in Dystopia, it's a really cool costume. And now, like Chris said, like it's this creature dressed all in black, and he's flowing in this cool flowing thing, and then the power goes out. So like, what are we going to see? And you don't miss a detail of this fantastic costume that Farnaz came up with. And I think that's because of this sort of design that Chris came up with, because it's all, to me, like everybody here does such amazing work. Why are we going to underexpose it and not see any of it? Like it makes no sense to me. So, but again, it's all in keeping with it being a family movie, right? It's still a superhero, like a family movie. So you've got to have just the right amount of dark, just the right amount of scares. There was a lot, like Farnaz will tell you how many conversations we had about Blackout. And, is he too scary? Is he not scary enough? Because like, yes, we're making a movie for the OG Henry Danger audience, but we're also making a movie that 6 to 11-year-olds have to watch. So it's a good range of people. And I think it's right on that edge where the character is scary. And if you're a little kid, you might hang on to mom and dad a little bit when that, the character's on screen. But Henry comes in and Henry kicks ass and Jasper kicks ass. So it's a lot of fun and it really works. But I think a lot of it is because of that design. Cundy did it on Death Becomes Her. He did it on Jurassic Park. We're going to talk about it in a second when we get to the Culdesac scenes, which were all shot on stage, but we referenced the perimeter fence scenes in Jurassic Park, which were all shot on the stage. And so we're like, what did Dean Cundy do with the T-Rex scenes in Jurassic Park? Well, let's do the same thing in the Culdesac. So Chris's lighting design was really pivotal, I think, in not only in creating the look narratively, but in making sure that we see everybody's work. Bridget's work is photographed beautifully because Chris kind of made sure to feature it, and not because I think if Bridget sees the movie and says, I don't see anything, because Chris just turned off all the lights, like that's not cool either.
Well, but I also like the lights go out, but I mean, if you may notice, you may not have, but I had 2 cars parked on either side of our street, and I played it as though the car lights aren't out, but like the rest of the city's gone out. So
Yeah.
you've got the visual cue of everything going out, but then there's 2 cars that are always running with lights on, and so they're actually like you've got some backlight and some natural looking like things are like something's there to throw your.
That was the cheat.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that worked. That was a great idea. Like, because that was Chris's idea. Like, let's just have a couple cars with like headlamps still on, and that will justify any lighting that we need in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
What I was impressed with this character Blackout that we were talking about is that this is an established character. He only had one episode, I think, in the original run, one episode of Danger Force where he showed up, but you have the concept of an idea and you're carrying it now into this new vision for Henry Danger.
I'm going to be honest, and I'll pass it off to Farnaz. I didn't even look at the character in the sitcom. I did not care what the character in the sitcom looked like. I'm not going to lie. So I didn't even bother to look at it. To me, I was just like, let's just come up with something cool on our own. And so I just threw it to Farnaz and I go, come up with some designs. Like I kind of had an idea of what it could be because I started storyboarding. And so she kind of took my storyboards a little bit and kind of ran with them. But I just kind of said, come up with something, Farnaz. Let's make it cool.
I'm gonna be honest here. I didn't even know that there was a character in the sitcom.
Either did I.
To me, it was a brand new character.
That's great.
No, we stole the name. To be fair, Skid, we weren't going to call it Blackout. It had, I forget how many other names. Like it went through like a whole approval process. And what happened is, very briefly, every time we came up with a name and we would send it to clearances, it would get rejected. So me and the writers, we like kept throwing out like, what about this name? What about this name? Like, no, you can't use that name. That's been used. And then it was Chris Nowak, who's one of the writers, said, well, we had this character from the sitcom called Blackout. And I'm like, is that cleared? Does that get cleared? And they're like, yeah, that clears. So I'm like, He's fucking Blackout. That's it. So, never reference it. Like I have to this day, I don't know what the character looks like on the show. No idea.
He looks like a commando kind of like he's got cargo shorts and a long and a trench coat with like a balaclava on. Like he's not really. It looks like he's going to rob a store.
Never watched it.
And he has a similar power set, though. So the power set lines up perfectly with what the character does. He's just matured a little as well. So far as what was your inspiration and how it came together for you?
I think not as scary as like the Death Eaters from Harry Potter, but like a wraith and a combination of those. One of the biggest things that we talked about was that we didn't want it to be human-esque. but we also didn't want it to like narrow it into like a category. So like there's so many different elements to it that you kind of like look at it, it's like, well, is it human? Is it an animal? What is it? Right. And that's the question sort of we wanted to create with the characters. The fact that like people look at it and go, what is this thing? Is it a ghost? Is it real? To everybody's imagination. We used a lot of different textures in there, like there's so many different fabric textures that we use to create different sort of sheens and layers so that the light picks up on it. Again, I was fabric shopping in LA and I came across this like one fabric that it sort of like looks like a hairy lizard skin. I think it's the best way to explain it. It's got like little tufts of hair, but then it has like the texture of like a lizard or like a snake skin kind of a print on it. So we're like, okay, well, this is a really good base. So for like the body and the arm, and then the cloak is a completely different material. It has a lot of flow to it, and it's got a lot of layers, so like can move with the action. The claws have sort of like he has these like elongated finger claws that we built from scratch, but that he still can move his hand and punch, but it kind of like doesn't look human-esque. And that has sort of like different textures onto it. The mask is actually like cow intestine leather texture. So it's like tripe. I found some dry tripe and we kind of created that sort of like texture on its face. And then you have like these sort of like beaked hood. Again, like it's all these elements that really like kind of make you guess what this person or what this thing really is. But that was sort of like the direction that we wanted to take with it, is that we didn't want it to be like a human or a specific animal or a specific creature reference.
And it works really well because he enters as a shadow and morphs into this biped, creature. And then in the movie, as you saw, we went through a number of different voices. And the voice initially that we had was like a very scary voice. I can't do it. And it was determined that it was way too scary for the 6 to 11 crowd. So when you see the movie, he sounds kind of urbane now. And he's got a little bit of like, he's like, hello, Henry. And he speaks almost like a British butler almost.
Yeah.
So it took a long time to get to that voice. The voice is I think his name is Trevor, the actor that did it. Just this perfect, like urbane. It was a joke that we had at the end of the movie. The joke that we had at the end of the movie when he says, ironically, now I'm about to black out. That joke is what informed the way he talked in the movie.
So Henry is pulled from dystopia into Missy's bedroom by her use of the reality altering device, the RAD that we were talking about earlier. And once again, we have a completely different set.
The shot where he zerps into the room, the A side of the shot is completely digital, 100% CG, other than the shot of blackout in the window. You know the shot, Bridget, with blackout in the window, what we call the welcome to the party pal shot. We put that in one of the window frames. The rest of the shot is entirely CG. When he goes through the sort of plasma, that's the ZERP, and he ends up on the B side, actually landing in the bedroom, that's practical. And that was in Bridget's room. So it's my favorite transition because you can't tell that it goes from CG to her bedroom. That was a great set. That was another one that, again, what I love the most about that set that Bridget designed is that it spoke to character. Everywhere you look in that set, a story was being told, either with the murder boards, with all the stuff that Missy was putting up on the walls, or seeing her sewing machine, or seeing her computer, and that she's kind of a science geek. Like, it's just everywhere you look, stories being told. And I think that's sort of the key, I think, with all the sets and all the locations in this, is that story was being told on all these sets.
I think that was definitely the most intricate set. We were establishing who she was, her background, what she'd been up to. We had a little map there for the her heist, just describing her as a super fan that she was. And then we were also through all the media that we had that she had collected as a superfan, sort of introducing the TV show, Henry Danger's Past. And there was, I don't know how many articles relating specifically to Henry Danger, Kid Danger, and all their the events that happened in the television's past. Yeah, it was great. It was a lot of fun to put together. All of that stuff was created like in the art department. All the articles were written by people who were on the show with us. And then there was also the all the dioramas, which the set deck crew put together. What they did was they took the stories that we were going to go to and built little dioramas with the idea that Missy would have invented these realities in her mind, and she would have built little dioramas. There's a flying cow in one. The barricade is up on the shelf there somewhere. The little mirror that Jace picks up to look at himself at the very beginning, the back of that's a lollipop that's suggesting the candies and stuff that we find at Shimmers. Just about every detail that's in that set relates to something else we're going to either see in the show, in one of the realities, or reflecting to the past show, the sitcom.
And the dioramas get a great feature coverage during the closing credits, which I think was a fantastic way of wrapping things up.
In the last minute of the movie, in the closing credits, I showed all the dioramas, and I had Chris bring, what the hell was that camera, that lens called, Chris?
Snorkel lens.
A snorkel lens. And he was shoving the cameras through the dioramas, which was fun. But yeah, it's in the closing credits, or in the last minute of the movie. And it's great because that's Paul Francis's great score is playing during that, and I know this isn't about the music, but Paul Francis's score is really fantastic. But yeah, and then what I love is there's a moment when Henry lands in Missy's room, so we meet her and we see her in her fantastic costume that she's made on her own, because we see the sewing machine and then we see that she holds up a sheet of paper that suggests that she sketched Henry's new costume, the new Kid Danger costume, which was really actually one of Farnaz's actual costume sketches that we stole and we put it in the movie as if Missy had drawn it. But this is actually a professionally produced costume sketch that we're like, that's going in the movie, and we just used it in the movie. But I think it was a great opportunity to show off the new costume. I know that Jace hadn't worn a mask on his face like that since 2020. And I know there was again, you want to talk about Sean with the mustache being glued onto his face, gluing a mask onto your face. Apparently you can get claustrophobic with that thing glued to your face after a while. Isn't that right, Jen? I mean, does that?
Yeah, just because it's like when you have something confined to your face that you're just not able to take off and you're dependent on people taking it off, it can get a little, when you're wearing it so long, like you have to, for TV or film, those things can get quite constricting, and every actor has a different point of view when it comes to things glued on their faces or makeup effects that has to be worn. It's just like Jim Carrey, who had to get military torture training for The Grinch because he was going crazy being fully encased in something for 7 hours. It took so long to do. So with Jace, I think the mask in the actual TV show was I think it was a flimsier mask, where ours was a little more constructed to be just a little bit more hard so that we had some durability in it, but it still had a lot of flex in it, just so that we can conform it to Jace's face. In our initial chats with Jace, when we had to do Zoom meetings with him, I said, we're going to try to see if there is a way that we can do this without having to glue it onto your face every day. Because I know that, that was a thing for him on the show, was the constant gluing of the mask, especially when he has to wear it all the time. Luckily in this movie, there was a good portion of our shooting days that he didn't have to do it. But were odd times where there was like, 4 days in a row where we're having to glue it to his face. And, you have to be so careful because you got to be careful with regards to the skin and just everything like that. So you have to be really careful with, how his costume came off, to making sure that, we didn't catch edges while it was glued on, or if anything had to be removed. And just for his comfort and, his sanity, we would take it off at lunchtime just to give him some breathing space, clean it off his face, and then re-glue it before we go back to set. But the shop did such a good job with forming the mask. Because he was in LA and we're up here, they had to measure his face in LA. So we had to go through a shop in LA who did these kind of 3D measurements. And so they went to his house, they measured him out. They sent all the specs back up to our shop, and they actually created from the measurement, they put it into a 3D machine, and they kind of made his head by their measurements. Their 3D machine made his whole entire head and face, and then they built the mask onto that. And then we had to design the mask with Farnaz, because with her costume, we had to make sure that the colors, the textures, and the sheens of all the colors were in sequence with the costume. And then just so it was comfortable on Jason's face. And you always have to have a hero and then a backup. Everybody always had two to work with. And I went through makeup school, and we had everything done to us that we would have to do on an actor. And I will say there were times where I was like, I don't want to be an actor. I don't want this done to my face every single day. I really do feel for them. But it does give you a sense of, sympathy when it comes to you having to do it to them. You can understand how it feels. So you try to do everything you can to make them feel comfortable with needing to do this every day. We try very hard just to try to do specific points on the mask to his skin that we glue, so that we didn't have to glue the entire thing around his face. Unfortunately, we had to glue most of it underneath just so that we didn't have any light shining through. And then every day we had to paint his eyes black. So we had to do the black first and then put the mask on. So I'd hand him the mask, and then he'd kind of push it into his face. However, it felt comfortable for him. And then, just remove it at the end of the night. But we got through it.
That was our first day of shooting too. That was day one.
Yeah.
We were so innocent. No, but like what I liked about both, Farnaz and Jenn is that, the advantage of being up in Vancouver is they've done a number of superhero shows. So they know the world, they know the drill. Once we had our initial talks that they would be able to do this and design these things and have it be super cool like it turned out. I couldn't be happier with how the costume turned out and how the mask turned out. And it's because obviously they know what they're doing. They've been doing this, for a long time. So they were telling me like, this is the materials for me, it was a lot of, again, pointing and grunting and nodding and going, yes, love it.
What I liked about Missy's the most was the smash in from dystopia. We go from this like cold blue streaks, clean kind of like, hyper real look into this like warm kid's bedroom. And like Bridget and Joe were saying, like first time you walk around that room, you can basically see the entire movie on the shelves and on the wall. And then you can see the storyline of the TV show like on like hanging in posters and news clippings and stuff. It's actually pretty cool. Like when I walked in, I was like, this is kind of day one for us. And I was
It was day one.
Impressed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the shots that you did show where Jason's just zerped in? Is that the right term? Zerped in. And he stands up and he's standing beside a poster of himself.
Yeah.
And I mean, that poster was there, but the way that you blocked that and put that shot together, I hadn't anticipated that.
Yeah, but a lot of the blocking happens because of the sets that you build or the costumes or Chris's lighting. I mean, that's where the blocking happens. Like the sets speak to me. I'm like, oh, let's do it right here. This is cool, And
it was hilarious. Like I was standing behind you, giggling when you were shooting that shot.
You're the one. You're the one. I was like,
Yes.
who's this person that's giggling?
That's hilarious.
Okay, trying not to. Trying not to.
No, and I love Chris what you did also with, like, you started to play with filters and with flares and which I thought was interesting, that you had a sort of different kind of look for each one of these worlds. And I think when we zerp into Missy's bedroom, that becomes reality too. Like everything in dystopia, that was all reality one. That was real. Like you could fly to dystopia, land at Dystopia International Airport and go to dystopia. But reality two, it's like a heightened real world. And like Missy at first doesn't even realize that she's in a alternate reality. And the way that Chris was sort of hinting at that with like really sort of over the top, like star filters and streaks and things like that on the filtration.
Well, that was my, again, Joe, like my Spielberg. So like next to Dean Cundy, I think Janusz Kaminski is like the Dean Cundy go-to DP. So I gave my little hat tip to Kaminski just in terms of his War of the Worlds star filter. So that was reality two for me. And then that kind of held us into the cul-de-sac and into the Missy's room, and then outside because the playground is technically the back of Missy's house, and then the cul-de-sac is the front of Missy's house. But I really tried to continue that star and that flare kind of just grounded you to know, okay, oh, we're in Missy's reality. Okay, I understand now. So without actually having to say anything, you knew where you were. But again, it's my little Spielberg tip of the hat for those who are paying attention, following their bingo cards.
Which I love, by the way.
Well, Chris, that's maybe a good transition because you talk about the scenes we have in Newtown, and there is the playground fight. And then later we come back to Newtown and have the cul-de-sac fight. What do you do to tie those two together to make this a consistent world, even though we have very different shooting objectives of these two scenes? That
was the catch. And I leaned on Bridget, but I also leaned on the filters. And we knew that we were doing the cul-de-sac exterior night inside at the
studio.
In the studio. Yeah. But it was vampires. So we went a little heavier in the mist and a little more, a little darker, but again, still lit, but all focused on the center of the cul-de-sac. And but I needed to tie the outside into the inside. So Bridget brought some of the fencing in and some of the lamp standards that were in the cul-de-sac front of the house. We brought to the location. And again, I made sure that I placed those lamp standards just in the spot where it wasn't hitting the talent, but it really tied. I thought it tied, it was the rug on the room kind of thing. Like it really tied it all together. And the way that I lit the night, because he goes from the coach kind of making him do push-ups, and that just like transitions into from day to night, as though he's just been doing push-ups forever kind of thing. But that transition is what kind of segues us into this night cul-de-sac, which again, because we had scenes in between, you kind of forget in a way what you're looking at. And then so that when we go into the stage cul-de-sac scene, I think it all tied together pretty well.
And then what we also did, Skid, is on the stage stuff, Chris had like sort of black duvetine going up to the top of the ceiling of the stage. Anywhere that we saw that black duvetine, visual effects added clouds and lightning in the clouds.
Yeah.
So everywhere you look, it sort of, and it doesn't have to be in every single shot, but you do it on enough shots that now your eye is telling you, yeah, we're outside. We're outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Hats off to Dan Dixon and those guys.
Yeah.
The way the story was structured, we establish Newtown, like we see the little the street where the kids get jumped. We see the bad guys. We see the houses, and we pick that neighborhood specifically because it's a little, it's a real subdivision, but it's a little. I just describe it as sort of vernacular. Looks sort of every townsy, a little stagey, even though it's real. And then so we were able to establish that we have a real playground. We're in a real neighborhood. We've seen that all. The audience has seen that all. So then when we do go into the stage, we've already shown the audience that they're in a real environment. I hope we fooled them. I hope people feel like it's outside.
It definitely feels that way. I think that was the key, is tying in the real location with the stage. and Bridget brought in the same architecture, the same sort of house design. The neighborhood was actually kind of a cute neighborhood, so Bridget and her team had to come in and like mess it up.
That's right.
Yeah,
Rough it up
like
a
bring
bit,
in
yeah.
garbage cans and trash on the floor and chain link fences and graffiti, so that it felt like it was not a great neighborhood, you
And
know.
that was a real trick too, because how crappy do we want this to be? And I had our illustrator do, I don't know how many versions of that playground, so that we could show it to the studio to say, I could take it as far as you want it to go, to make it just a horrible place to be. But I don't think that's what they wanted. We wanted that sort of derelict light. It's a bad neighborhood, but it's not that bad.
Nickelodeon itself wasn't driving the creative, really. Like, we're making ultimately a movie for Paramount Plus based on a Nickelodeon IP. However, there were things like this was one of the things, like we talked about Blackout, how scary was Blackout going to be? We talked about the violence, how much punching and things like that can we do? And then we also talked about Newtown and how much of a sort of bad neighborhood can we make it? And like Bridget said, she had a bunch of drawings and artwork that I would send to the studio. And like one drawing felt like you were going to step on a hypodermic needle and, get some disease. That was a pass. And then you sort of start, saying, all right, this is the one. And so there's enough that you get it, that you get why Missy had to summon Henry or Kid Danger to come into her world. It had to be, because that was the sell. It had to be run down enough that it would motivate why Missy felt compelled to bring in Kid Danger into her world to help her fight crime. It couldn't be safe. It had to be there had to be something wrong with it for her to do all of this.
Farnaz, before we turn to the more obvious costumes that play out here in Newtown, what Joe's talking about of sort of balancing this town, is that an issue with your work as well and how people are dressed in this neighborhood?
Not so much, but
Okay, well then I won't use that
it's
then.
still yeah, it still had to it had to marry with what Bridget and everybody else was trying to portray, right? So it's not like, we could do, a very posh clothing and contrasted, right? So you had to be on the same level as the sets and the look of that reality. But I mean, our main two characters are in superhero costumes, so
Yeah.
And the other thing is, technically for us, the reality is in a fantasy world because it's an alternate reality. It's not the real world. So we had a little bit of a leeway with that as well. So,
and we got to see Piper dressed like a vampire in that world. That was the first time that we get to introduce her,
yeah.
which she looked, Ella Anderson, who plays Piper, just absolutely adored not only the costume, but the makeup that she got to wear. And, I could not have been happier in that costume. And she was introduced in this world, in Newtown.
Yeah, I would think that, Farnaz, you and Jenn, you just got to run with that.
Yeah. Me and Jenn have a history of working together. So we've done several different shows together and we collaborate really, really well. So we try as much as we can to work together. I try to kind of, put in a good word for her every time I get a show, try to get her on. But, we've kind of know how to read each other's minds a little bit. And we're always talking and just kind of bouncing back ideas and just, trying to make sure that everything is cohesive.
Yeah.
Overall.
And it's really important to do that too, because, when it comes to makeup and, a lot of those costumes are black and they're all paled out. So you don't want to get the white makeup on the costume or any other types of makeup on the costume. Yeah, it's just cool to collaborate with Farnaz when it comes to, and we've done vampire shows together. So it was also doing a vampire that wasn't scary with regards to the makeup because we had prosthetics, especially with Franchini. We had to try to make him look not too scary, that would be frightening, but different in a cool way. And I think the piece that we ended up using from the shop was one that they had from a different show. And we kind of augmented it a little bit to, we did it so that it was in the confinements of what we were working with Henry Danger, so that, because I think the one that we originally looked at that I showed Joe, it was a little too scary.
Yeah.
And so we kind of had to filter that one a little bit so that it accommodated the show and the needs that we were going for. And then with Ella, we just brow blocked her eyebrows out because we figured we didn't want her to look like Frankini, because we felt that I believe what we did was that depending on how long they were in this world, depicts how they look. So I think because Frankini had been there the longest, Ella was also there, but we didn't want everyone to look the same. And so in the initial changing into a vampire, like when Missy first gets turned, she has a specific look. So if she were to stay in that new town as a vampire, her look might evolve differently, more towards Ella's or towards Frankini's. But all those guys were so ecstatic to wear the costumes and do the makeup and the hair. I know Frankie loved it. Ella, she just had so much fun with it. She thought it was just the best thing. She's like, I'm so excited just to play a different type of character that just isn't, me. I look different and I love that. So, and that's always exciting when they get excited.
Yeah, and we had an interesting thing happen with Ella and her fangs that maybe you want to talk about, Jenn. That like her initial fangs, her mouth, I guess, is so small that when the initial fangs that Jenn made, you couldn't see them unless she had her mouth wide open. So at the 11th hour, right, Jenn? What was it that you had to do?
It was during the camera tests. We had the fangs molded for the actual fangs in the mouth. And when she was talking, just because of how she was with her mouth, it just wasn't opening enough to be able to see. I had to work with Joe, and we were just like, well, what if we stuck them on these two teeth? And so what we did is we took a photo of her with her mouth like kind of smiling, and then we went through Photoshop and we created the fangs on those two teeth closer to the two front teeth, and just to make sure it didn't look weird. And Joe was like, yeah, let's do it. And she also wanted to show the fangs because she thought that was so cool. All of them had to go to a dentist to get fitted properly for these teeth so that they can also still talk and, do their acting with these teeth in. And we ended up putting them closer into her mouth so that when she did speak her lines or did any sort of mouth movement, that we were able to see those fangs. So they're a little closer than what normal typical fang teeth are in position, but it worked for her and it actually looked really cool.
It did. It did look really cool. And by the way, Jenn, I think it was yours that the metallic finger, so just so you know, Skid, she became an electric vampire because of that finger. Because like
that was
because initially Jenn had made them for all 10 fingers.
It was Farnaz's.
It was
Farnaz. Sorry, Farnaz.
Yeah,
that's okay.
So I'm giving Jenn all the credit. She's never going to call you again now, Jenn. No.
Farnaz is taking the credit back. Yeah, that's we're setting the record straight here.
So I don't know how we ended up with the thing just being on one finger. I don't remember how we got there.
It was because originally we wanted to put it on all the fingers, and they're like basically these ornate sort of like metallic nails that look like almost like a knife. But in talking with Jenn and just kind of like looking at her actions and everything like that, it felt like every time she moved, these nails are going to interfere with her performance. So we decided, let's try just putting it on one finger, and that's her dominant finger. And it just becomes this sort of like, it becomes her thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
It really makes her character.
And that's where the idea of the electric vampire came up, because I was like, what is up with this like one metal thing on her finger? And then I turned to Chris, the writer, and I just said, dude, she should be an electric vampire, and like bolt of electricity should come out of that thing and she should use it. And so when you see the movie now, it's like she's an electric vampire because of that. That's where the idea was born. It came, again, talk about being inspired either by the sets or by the makeup, or in this case, this costume accessory. created this whole idea that became like this part of the movie, and it became like it became a few jokes. Like we got a few jokes out of it. We got some set pieces. But it all, again, as a director, this is what I love about collaborating with these folks, is that they do things that are part of their craftsmanship and part of their artistry. And then it inspires me because I look at that and I can go, hey, what about it? And I can do my pointing and grunting, when I see what they've done.
Not related to the vampires, but another character that makes their appearance in this world, Coach Craig. I had a question for you, Chris, concerning the effects around when he's walking, the camera seems to be shaking, and then he has that whistle effect. Mm-hmm. I'm curious how much is you're doing practical, or you have to anticipate that visual effects is going to come in on this with this character, which incidentally appears in a couple of worlds. I first noticed the camera shake in Shimmers earlier, but I'm curious what your thinking was around that character and how he was going to play out.
That was an all digital camera shake for stuff like that. I mean, I think it's sometimes it's against my better judgment to hand it all over to VFX. But this time, I think just the timing of it and the aesthetic, it was definitely right away. It was a VFX.
That was Steve Haugen, our editor, came up with that idea. So when I saw his cut, his first editor's cut, he had added all those camera shakes on every single one of Coach's footsteps. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Oh, we're keeping that in. He then had to turn it over to visual effects to do it because he was doing it in the Avid, and and even in the Avid, it looked pretty cool. But then sound design comes in and adds these heavy lumbering boom, 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 and the camera shakes me, and it's pretty cool. But we hadn't thought of that while we were shooting. It would have been interesting had we thought of that, because then we could have maybe done some shots where we go to his foot or whatever, but
Mm-hmm. But that is a character that shows up in multiple worlds. And I'm curious if there is anything, Chris, you talk about taking a fresh approach to each world. Those transition characters, how do you accommodate the transition between worlds with the same characters?
You do need to. I mean, luckily, like a lot of the characters, with the exception of Coach Craig kind of stays the same in every world. I mean, everyone else seems to transition with the world. So as things change, then they become steampunk, or they become their dystopian look, or they become their the vampire kind of look. So, but Missy and Henry are always there, and it's again that's just this like it was the way that we came across this just as a visual point of view, that the main action is always fairly neutrally lit. Like we didn't really they kind of morph and fit into the reality that we're again to the environment that they're shooting. But the actual, it's more the costumes and the characters and the actual actors themselves that really make it different and make it what it is. So like Joe and I both came at it from this perspective where if you watch a Guardians of the Galaxy or you watch Back to the Future, the characters are always kind of neutrally lit, but they're in these dynamic sets with these dynamic costumes and this dynamic situation that just leads you into believing what's happening. Like you just as an audience, you're just along for the ride. This is what these characters go through on a daily basis, and you're just going along with them, kind of thing.
Yeah, and even when they went into the post-apocalyptic world, that was a completely different look for Chris, because it was like a more desaturated kind of look. But again, like always about taking care of what the characters look like. But when you go into that world, Chris, what I love that you also did this in the color correct during the color grade is that when we first get into the world, it's actually super desaturated, and the saturation starts coming in gradually with each scene as the sun is setting. So I thought that was kind of a fun thing. And also, by the way, for everybody here, fantastic location and set to do that. Bridget's little this the post-apocalyptic forest world was really built out there. All that was scaffolding that cast and crew were getting up, and so obviously it had to be built, with safety standards. We were getting up there with cranes, so we wouldn't have to bring up, dollies and all that up there. But it was a just fantastically built set. I think, Farnaz, there was a point when I was first watching the movie when I was showing the studio the director's cut, and I went down to LA and I was watching it at Paramount. And that scene came on. So we were watching the movie. I was watching it for the first time in a screening room. And again, not that I hadn't appreciated the costumes when we were shooting them, but seeing the costumes up there, the level of detail suddenly, because I had been watching it on my laptop, when I was editing it remotely with my editor. So when I saw the director's cut at Paramount, was the first time that I was like, God damn, man, Farnaz's costume, the amount of detail, not just in what our principals are wearing, but in what the Canadian Mounties are wearing, which, by the way,
Yeah.
all the Canadian Mounties, like all the Canadian crew, like I was really nervous about that stuff because like the writers came up with that idea about post-apocalyptic Canadian Mounties,
They're fighting the syrup wars.
the syrup wars. And like, so both the writers are American. I'm an American. So I was like, when they came up with it, I laughed and I was like, guys, we're shooting this in Canada. Like we're on their turf, I don't know. So like, I went to everybody here and I said, how do we all feel about this? And to their credit, I think Canadians have really great sense of humor because they were like, oh my God, it's hysterical. And then the actors that we cast up there were doing the sort of exaggerated Canadian accent and just a whole lot of fun. But those costumes are so amazing. And just kind of like when I was watching them really big, I was like, that's when I was, again, I was standing right in front of the actors watching the performances. So I was seeing the costumes, but there was something about when it all came together that it all really worked fantastically well. And
Thank you.
but anyway, but that was an amazing set. That was amazing costumes. That was just a tour de force, I think, for everybody on here.
Kudos to Kenny, the props guy, for coming up with the rig for the Mounties.
Let them actually carry a grown human on their backs for hours at a time.
Well, we had to cast 3 huge stunt guys to be the steeds, and then 3 smaller actors
dainty
to be on their back. So that way, I don't want to, because they're grown men, all 3 of them were grown men, but they were all smaller in stature, let's just say. And because they had to be, carried around by these, but all the stunt guys were like 6'2" or 6'3". They were like huge guys, so they can carry these. But yeah, Kenny Gibbs, I mean, all of his prop work, like he's the one that, designed with Bridget, the rad, and obviously those harnesses and all the great props. But like, I don't know where to begin with the post-apocalyptic world because there's so much amazing stuff in there.
What I liked about it was, again, like the camera test wise and all that other stuff, I worked with Bridget. So like, I'm going to backtrack to dystopia. Like in dystopia, I made sure that none of the signage and nothing in there was green because Henry's force field was green. So I wanted when Henry came in his force field, that green took over the whole place. So that was like distinct, and that was so everything in dystopia. And so the same with our steampunk world here was I wanted everything to kind of lean towards the reds and the rusts. And because I was really, especially in the beginning, I pretty much turned off the green channel, and it was all desaturated, but I found those reds and those blues and I really saturated them and made them pop. So to me, that's the half the fun. But again, like my little Kaminski Ready Player One kind of look, right? Where you have that bleach bypass kind of feel to it. But it was just appropriate. It just really, like, you have this dystopian, and like Joe said, like we slowly started, if you watch the scene back again, we slowly build the greens back in. And then by the time we get to our lament of the sunset shot, we're kind of back into Technicolor again. So it was a great set, but it was awesome to work with Jenn and Farnaz and Bridget to just be like, look, this is what I'd like to do. The colors are going to do what they're going to do, but just really lean in hard on the reds and blues and just try and stay away from the greens. And I think it turned out great.
For me, like, every world was so much fun to kind of build and reference. Like, I got to reference like a lot of different movies and what inspires me in my work. And this one was like the really like Mad Max, and we really wanted to, it was all about like just finding and assembling and just making sure we use pieces that like looked sort of like from a post-apocalyptic world that would function, sort of functional, and not just sort of like fashion aspect to it. So it's like, the pockets are placed in a way that it's like, it's useful, not just because, oh, let's just put a pocket here, piecing together the Mounties. We decided that, okay, you know what? They found 2 Mountie uniforms and they had to share it between 3 people. And how does that work? How do you share two Mountie uniforms? So basically, like, 2 have the pants, 1 has a full jacket, minus the sleeve. You know, one got the short end of the stick and just got the sleeve aspect of the jacket. So it just sort of like
The
ranks
hat pulled down.
the hats pulled down. You know, only two people I believe have the mounty hats and the other one doesn't. It's just sort of like one of those things where like, okay, what can we make it happen that is sort of like relatable and realistic and yet make it fantastical at the same time. And the other challenge with this is that this is all Missy's imagination. So it's, again, like Joe said with like Shimmers, is like it's all from the point of view of a 12-year-old. These are her imagination. These are her imaginary characters that she's created. How does she envision them as opposed to like just what we really see? So
another example of sort of their work inspiring my work. One of the things that was in Schwaz's sort of post-apocalyptic costume, he had this. What do you call it, Farnaz? It's like a single eyepiece.
Single eye patch.
Yeah, a single eye patch. And so I just came up with the idea during blocking that when Schwaz sees Henry, he should see him, and he can't really see him out of that eye. He just switches it to the other eye. Because I was watching Michael, who plays Schwaz, and he was just kind of messing with it. And I was like, oh, dude, you got to do that in the scene. Like, it's like that eye is not great. So maybe switch to the other eye. And again, it's all jest because it's this fantastic costume, and you get a laugh, and and it's a little joke, and it all comes from not something that was written. It's something that comes up because of the costume design.
One of my favorite parts of the movies or elements was the book that we created that were the illustrations of all of her stories, and all the different surf wars are described in there. Every reality that's shown in the movie is written out and illustrated in the book, plus a whole bunch that I guess we didn't get to in our alternate realities, but that was a lot of fun to put together. And again, it was melding what Farnaz was doing, what props was doing, what was in the script, and then again, the book was on set day one, completed before we had even shot half of the stuff.
Yeah, and what I loved is that in that shot where all the pages are flipping past is a foreshadowing of all the different realities. Like as the pages are flipping past, we really feature Bridget's book because it tells you, all those pages tell you this is what's coming. It's sort of like a Mission Impossible a prologue, where here's all the different little things that you're going to see if you pay attention. The person that's watching it for the first time isn't going to catch that, but it's definitely there for the person watching it the second time. You're like, oh my God, it's every single thing that happens in the movie. I love that book so much that, like, after wrap, I'm not going to get into it now, but I came up with other things that we could have done with the book that would have been exciting and thrilling, but I'll leave that for a potential part 2 if we ever did that.
That's awesome. Can I just make a note here, just that I just really have to commend I love working with Joe, mostly because he sees the movie as he's and he's able to describe what he wants. He storyboards to a T, and the reason we were able to make this film is because not only does he stick to what he wants to shoot, but there's no scraps or spares that kind of fall off the truck. We shoot his storyboards shot for shot, and he has such conviction in how he wants to film that we got such a head start, I think, in terms of what we were able to accomplish, because we knew that we were going to film exactly the movie that he described to us. There was no, hey, we're just going to shoot coverage just for the sake of coverage. We were deliberately making this film like piece by piece, shot by shot, and because we were able to plan for that, that was, to me, it's always just a not only a treat, but I think you're able to accomplish so much more and put it on the screen because you're planning for the film that you're about to shoot. So it's just a real privilege, and yeah, just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks, man. Like, and again, I think, you're all professional, Skid. If I understand correctly, you were a first AD for a while. I having been a producing director, I've worked with other directors who don't come in prepared or don't have a sort of definitive plan or are sort of winging it, or, you know, like, and again, there's no right or wrong way to work, but for me, I find that it's a better work environment to come in and do my work prior to talking to my collaborators. And again, it's not that I'm coming in and saying it's this and, you know, I'll see you at the wrap party. I come in and this is kind of what I see and this is what I want to do. And like Chris said, a lot of it is just sort of like, you know, I've sketched it out and all that. But it's the Neil Simon approach where, you know, it's like, Neil Simon is one of the greatest playwrights that's ever come. But he would tell his actors, you know, I'm not saying I'm Neil Simon, by the way, but he would tell his actors, come up with a better line. Like if you come up with a funnier line, then let's put it in, because for him, it was the Shakespeare analogy, which is the play is the thing. You know, no matter what, the play is the thing. And I think that for any crew, all that they want to know is that when they show up at call time that morning and when they leave at wrap, that they're not going to be wasting their time, that there's going to be, you know, a plan that they're going to follow. And then most importantly, that when they follow that plan and they see the finished result, that their hard work is up there and it's worth it. And they've seen it and they're like, aha, there it is. So it's not just the plan. And then when you see the final product, it's completely different from what you thought it was going to be. It's a plan because I think it's a better working situation when everybody's very clear, but it's also a way of, I could talk to Farnaz or to Jenn or to Bridget or to Chris, and I could say, well, we're not going to see that. We're just going to look in this direction. We're just, you know, we're not going to see the back of the costume, or don't worry about the makeup on that side because I'm only looking at this side. Like you can have all those conversations with Bridget. It could be a 3-wall set or a 2-wall set or just a flat. And you can only do that if you're planning and you're planning ahead of time. You know, things inevitably fall apart or there's hiccups or whatever, so you can adjust. But I think having a plan is the only way to work, at least for me. But it's one of the primary reasons that I wanted to bring on these collaborators, because I knew that I could say, hey guys, this is what I see, and then let them go, and they won't plus and improve anything that was in my sort of limited imagination. They'll come back and, you know, there it is. And again, it's like Shakespeare said, you know, the play is a thing. I'm not precious about anything. It's better to have a plan than to, like, I'm sure you've all sat with directors that directors are like, well, what do you think? And you know, and like, they're just waiting to hear ideas from you. And then it becomes like grocery shopping. They're just picking things off the shelves. I don't think that's a way to make any kind of movie or a TV show. So thank you, Chris, by the way.
To top it off, the fact that you're able to allow us to take this, which is amazing, and then take it up to the next shelf and be excited about it. I mean, that again, I'll follow you to the end of the world. Yeah. Pretty cool.
I really appreciate that. Even though there is a plan and everything is planned out, on the day when we have an opportunity to be making flapjacks with hockey sticks, that gets worked into the action.
That was Bridget. That was Bridget and Shay. Yeah, that was Bridget and Shay. That right. And I was like,
we just put it there. You used it.
Yeah. Yeah. That when they were flipping the flapjacks with the hockey stick, that was like, that was like Bridget and Shay. Like, wouldn't this be funny? And I was like, yeah, that'll be funny. Let's do that. That was it.
It's awesome. Very cool.
A lot of fun.
The way all these elements of this film came together, I think it really works. And the collaboration you guys are talking about, it really is just a mirror of that, how all of you guys have worked together. We've been talking longer than the actual film, but I think we're giving the fans what they want. And I think we're encouraging them to go watch the film again. They're going to see all kinds of things they didn't notice on the first pass. But on that note, we'll call it a wrap. Great having you guys here. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks
for having us.
Thanks, Skid.
Yeah, thanks, Skid. It's awesome.
And thank you, Farnaz, for recommending all of us to come on here. That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Farnaz, yeah, it's awesome.
It was such a collaborative effort.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info on our website, belowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and links to all our social media, so check it out. This episode is a wrap on Below the Line Season 21. We are continuing almost immediately with our Oscar series, where industry professionals discuss the nominees in their category of expertise. We're aiming for 13 episodes of Oscar goodness, and fingers crossed they all come together. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. The Below the Line logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts, and most importantly, tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.
So hopefully, I haven't seen the movie yet. I hope.
Bridget, by the way, we're going to pretend like you've seen the movie. And so when you reference not seeing the movie, that's not going to be in the podcast. Okay. We're going to, so, because everything you can, and if you say, if you're like, and if you do say something like, oh, remember that prop and it wasn't in the movie, I'm expecting Joe to step up and say, oh, by the way, Bridget, that's not actually there. So you can pretend like it is, and we'll fix it in post.
I'm sorry, Robert. I don't mean to be
No. But as a quick aside, for what it's worth, I think we're going deep into Shimbers. I think we should say everything we want to say about it now. And Chris, I was going to cue you up. You should continue with the lighting challenges and kind of fill it out. We will not be revisiting Shimmers, folks. So get your souvenirs. And the only other thing is that Joe, you called me Robert, which if my mom was here, she'd appreciate. But we didn't introduce Robert. I'm only Skid on the show. So so they don't think we have a seventh voice. I'll fix that. But if anyone else wants to reference me, please call me Skid. All right, but Chris, you have the floor.
Thanks, Skid.